Merry Christmas from Crime Talk. That's right, it is December 25th, Sunday, which means it is the weekly recap from Crime Talk. Hope you had a wonderful Christmas. Hope you enjoy the weekly recap. All right, as he likes to be known, Sam Bankman-Fried likes to be known as SBF. He faces 8 charges, including allegedly conning investors out of, a paltry $1.8 billion by diverting cash to his private crypto hedge fund called Alameda Research that just coincidentally happened to be run by his ex-girlfriend, Caroline Ellison. Well, some of the charges that he's got include wire fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and each of the charges carries up to 20 years in prison, but those can all be stacked consecutively, which means he's probably closer to about 120 years in prison. And when you go to federal prison, you serve 85% of that sentence before you are eligible for parole. Now, as we talked about last week, old Sam Bankman-Fried has been held in the maximum security section sick bay of the Fox Hill Penitentiary there in the Bahamas. Now, normally, apparently at this facility, inmates have to wait about 2 weeks for assessments before they're moved to the general population. Make sure they acclimate to the environment that they're in, make sure they're not going to harm themselves. They usually have to take a test to make sure they follow all the rules. That's right, you have to take a test to get the general population to show that you know the rules to follow. So during a court hearing last week, when he was arrested, he asked to be released on bond, even though there was an indictment from the United States. The United States wants to extradite old SBF, and he asked to be released because, he's got attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. He's going to need his medications, and oh, by the way, he's a vegan. So therefore, his dietary restrictions simply are just not going to be possible while he's in custody. Well, needless to say, the judge said, I don't think so. And I said last week, old SBF wants to fight extradition. Well, he may change his mind after spending a few days in the prison there in the Bahamas that has been found by some people to be inhumane. So what happened? Word came out over the weekend that old SBF said, you know what, had enough of the Bahamas. Let's go to the United States and get the ball rolling there. Well, what happened in court today? Well, apparently his local counsel, the attorney there in the Bahamas, had no idea, even though it was on every newspaper and headline basically across the United States that he was going to come to the United States. The court added it on the docket, and his local counsel had no idea and needed to confer with his counterpart in New York, who's going to be representing Sam Bankman-Fried on those charges there, and then they could talk. Well, needless to say, nothing got done. But apparently, there was a big old fancy jet waiting, courtesy of the United States Marshals, to take old SBF back to the United States. Now, my guess is old SBF thinks that he is going to somehow get to the United States. Everyone's going to vouch for him to being a good guy, a great guy. He's a great guy. And guess what? He thinks he's going to go home. He's going to get a bond. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen because he still has resources, and the chances are now it's for real. I think this guy seriously didn't think that he was going to be charged because he just said he didn't know, and that he was so aloof, worrying about the bigger picture and then focusing on marketing and things like that, that he just wasn't sure where all the money went. Yeah, that's not going to cut it. So he's still in custody, and the United States still wants him back. I don't think he's going to get released. And if he does get sent back to the United States, he's going to be held at the same facility where old Ghislaine Maxwell was held. And oh yeah, that guy named Jeff. Just make sure all the cameras are working all of the time. Because apparently they go off occasionally, and you never know what's going to happen when that's off. The cameras go off. You just never know. So we will have to wait and see. But as someone who's represented several people over the years that have stolen large sums of money from people, his behavior is classic white-collar criminal. First, I'm sorry, I had no idea. This is a big mistake. I can get the money back. It's all going to be okay. And then the games begin. Oh, I want to go back to the United States. Oh, I don't want to go back to the United States. Oh, I'm telling you, from a professional aspect, they're two of the most manipulative type of criminal defendants out there, white-collar criminals and oftentimes sex offenders. They are a very close second. That just tells you the true con men, like the SBFs of the world. His name is going to go down with Ponzi, Madoff. Yeah, not good for him for sure. And in some other Sam Bankman-Fried news, his girlfriend is apparently, allegedly, cooperating with officials to, kind of spin her narrative that she was recruited and, just didn't know. Was just probably following old SBF's advice, his direction. And that is Caroline Ellison. She's 28, and she was the CEO of Almeida Research. Like I said, it was a company founded by Sam Bankman-Fried, which is accused of gambling with FTX clients' money on risky trades. And he managed to lose, his $16 billion personal wealth literally overnight. Certainly some of it had to do with Miss Ellison indeed. She's going to be charged. Her way of getting on board is getting in early, getting a proffer agreement, and cooperating with the government to reduce any sentence that she is going to get. Bottom line, what have I said on this show many times, ladies and gentlemen? It's always about the money. And clearly, that's all it was. They were trying to get as much as they could, as quickly as they can, for doing a little amount of work as possible. And what's the other one that we always say? That's right. The threat of imminent incarceration tends to break the bonds of loyalty. Everyone within that little SBF little circle, guess what? They are all going to be lawyering up, and they are going to be rolling on Sam Bankman-Fried, the true mastermind of this alleged theft and fraud. We shall wait and see. Keeping with the theme of the day, that's right, he's a quitter. He quit. He thought he was going to go to the United States, extradite himself, waive extradition, and go back. No, he quit. He quit. He's a quitter. Even Ellison, the girlfriend, quitter, didn't even fight, just quit. Anyway, we'll see how things come out here in the next couple of days. Somehow I think the United States is going to look like the freaking Ritz-Carlton compared to a Bahamian jail. Is the FBI taking over the investigation in Idaho? Well, it sure sounds like it. The FBI has assigned additional agents to investigate the unsolved November 13th homicides of 4 University of Idaho students. Now, the Moscow Police Department, not Moscow, even though it's spelled that way, which is leading the investigation into the deaths of Ethan Chapin, Zaina Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, and Madison Mogan, said Monday in a press release that 60 FBI agents and 2 members of the Behavioral Analysis Unit have been assigned to the case. Now, on December 15th, the last time the police issued a press release, there were 46 FBI agents and 2 Behavioral Analysis Unit analysts assigned to the case. Apparently, they have about 10,000 tips that are coming in, and they are reviewing all of those tips. The Moscow Police Department said that they're checking to ensure that we have individuals to look at all of the tips and any piece of evidence that they can link to the case. Now, in addition to the 62 FBI agents, there are also 11 Moscow Police Department detectives and supporting staff, as well as 28 Idaho State Police personnel assigned to the investigation. And now, exactly 36 days after the 4 students were killed in their home near campus between 3 and 4 a.m. on November 13th, police have not announced any suspects or persons of interest in the case. And authorities continue to search for the white Hyundai, somewhere between 2011 and 2013 model of an Elantra, which was spotted near the alleged crime scene on King Road in Moscow, Idaho in the early morning hours. Could this be a break? I don't know. Photos of an abandoned car have been circulated online. A spokesperson for the Eugene, Oregon Police Department said that they are working to impound the vehicle and forward the information about the white Hyundai to the Moscow Police Department. The public information officer for the Moscow Police Department said that they are aware of the vehicle and they are investigating the vehicle. Now, the Eugene Police Department confirmed a vehicle was found on West 7th Street in Eugene, Oregon, and it is not clear whether this vehicle is the Hyundai being sought by investigators. Now, Moscow, Idaho is more than 750 miles away from Eugene, Oregon, and law enforcement has said previously that they are combing through information of about 22,000 white Hyundai Elantras that need to be checked out. Now, the family attorney for the Gonsalves, a guy by the name of Shannon Gray, has stated that members of the Gonsalves family have been getting harassed by the public, and they believe that that is completely inappropriate. Now, the attorney, Mr. Gray, also revealed that the lead investigator of the Moscow Police Department only has 2 years of experience. Now, it's unclear whether he has 2 years of experience as a police officer or 2 years of experience as a detective. Either way, not a whole lot of experience, let's just put it that way. Now, you also have to consider in smaller jurisdictions, officers rotate from being a detective to being back to a patrol officer, and it just depends on rotation. It just truly, truly depends. But you have to look. We have now 62 FBI agents and analysts, and I would venture to guess that most of them are analysts, not actual FBI agents. But they still have come up with nothing. So this person or persons who allegedly killed 4 individuals, and they did it, we just don't know who allegedly did it, must be a criminal mastermind that they left no clues behind. Was this some sort of sophisticated serial killer, or was this just some guy or woman that just completely got away with a quadruple homicide because they were lucky? I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that the FBI would be able to come in and help. I mean, they did, after all, help and misfile the lead investigation in the Delphi murder. So, color me skeptical and all the stuff that the FBI has been in lately. I mean, I don't know. Maybe did they bring these people over from the, monitoring tweets at Twitter? I don't know. But it's just very surprising to me that here we are now 36 days later and nothing on this case. It's just very surprising. I don't know what to tell you. Now, police have also apparently cleared multiple individuals, a decision that has been questioned by the family of Kaylee Gonsalves, who's obviously one of the victims. Now, the family is becoming quite frustrated, but let's face it, probably don't need to harass the Gonsalves or any of the victims' families. Just saying. Now, the Moscow Police Department have looked into the mystery car behind the crashed Hyundai that was found in Eugene, Oregon, and the police believe there's no connection whatsoever of that case to the murdered college students. So now they're asking for people to stop hounding the actual car's owner. That's right. Now, yesterday we brought you the story, this whole thing about the Hyundai. It's abandoned there, no license plate. It's got to be good. Things are looking up. Maybe a break in the case. Turns out not the case. And if you joined us for our live program last night, we brought you the report, the press release from the Moscow Police Department, and they're like, yeah, has nothing to do with it. We've spoken to the owner. The car is registered to somebody in Colorado, and they have no connection to the Idaho case regarding the 4 slain college students there in Moscow, Idaho. So the Moscow PD says that the department has spoken to the female owner of the white car found in Eugene, and she is not believed to have any relation to any property in Moscow, Idaho, and anything related to the investigations. As you may recall, the cops say the vehicle is registered in Colorado and was involved in a collision, subsequently being impounded. The Moscow police are specifically asking the public to stop contacting the owner. I get it. Everybody gets excited. But there is kind of technically one investigation going on, however slow it may be going, so they don't need to be bombarded by thousands of internet sleuths, so to speak. And this car came about because apparently somebody was sleeping inside of this car, even though it looks like it was obviously been in an accident and abandoned. And they made contact with the person, and the matter's all been cleared up. And to say the least, the murder investigation, let's face it, it's gone cold. And the attorney for the Gonsalves family stated yesterday that the lead investigator in this probe is a former Army veteran. He's 32 years old, and he joined the law enforcement community 2 years ago. The Gonsalves family attorney has stated that the man in charge, a guy by the name of Brett Payne, has been on the force for 2 years. He's been hired in 2020 as a rookie, and so he has 2 years of experience, which is not exactly instilling a whole lot of trust and confidence. Now, let's face it, the guy that may be the, quote, lead investigator, listen, they've got 60-some-odd FBI agents, state police. He may be the lead, but he's not in charge. And I truly believe the police are working diligently. They've got 62 people, almost 100 agents, 62 federal agents, state police, as well as full-time police officers there in Moscow working on this case. If they had something, they want to solve this case just as quickly as everyone else does. They just have nothing to go on, which, as we talked about on the live last night, is, wow, is this person some sort of expert, or are they just super lucky to go in and, slay 4 people and get out with not a single piece of physical evidence tying them back to an individual? Interesting. Well, what's also interesting is yesterday, investigators returned to the house where these 4 college students were stabbed to death, because they say they went back to collect more evidence in an ongoing investigation, which I think is a little weird because, as you recall, the investigators had turned the house back over to the landlord. So their crime scene people were in the residence for about 20 minutes yesterday. They continued in their investigation in regards to the death of obviously Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogen, Zainer Kronoble, and Etha Chapin for the murders that go back to November 13th. We'll continue to follow that. Hopefully something will break here sooner rather than later. Now, if you've ever thought that there were 2 justice systems in the United States, those for the wealthy and the rich and powerful and everybody else, well, let me give you an example and why you should be offended. So the FTX founder, Sam Bankman-Fried, the guy that's accused of stealing billions of dollars and defrauding people out of just as much money, guess what? He is being released on a $250 million personal recognizance bond. What does that mean? Yes, the man who is an accused fraudster who lies to people is getting released with simply his promise to appear and his signature. That's right. Now, he will be restricted and is confined to his parents' Palo Alto, California home. Can you imagine? Oh, the punishment of it all. So the federal magistrate judge said today that the now disgraced former executive at his first appearance in New York federal court after he was extradited from the Bahamas, that's right, where he was flown via private jet late Wednesday night after he waived his extradition hearing there in the Bahamas. And that's right, he's flown on a Gulfstream 550. He didn't get a simple transport that could take days or weeks to get back. I get it. They want to make sure he's there. But if they knew they were going to release him, what was the rush to send him back via private aircraft, a Gulfstream 550, for goodness sakes? When my clients have been extradited back, they get a ride in a van, and it takes weeks to get to where they need to go. Well, what can you say? Maybe I'm just a little too cynical. So under this bail arrangement, Mr. Fried will live with his parents, like I said, in Palo Alto, Northern California. Can you imagine the stress he's going to be under? Well, he's going to have to wear an electronic bracelet, and he can't leave his home, and that's going to be put on him before he leaves the courthouse. And like I said, the judge said that the $250 million personal recognizance bond, which is simply a written promise to appear in court, will be secured by his parents' interest in their home. He is also required to surrender his passport and receive mental health and substance abuse evaluation and any treatment that is recommended. And any expense over $1,000 would have to be approved by the government prior to engaging in that. Now, the judge, and I'm not really going to, fault the judge here for this because the government agreed. But the judge could have said no. The judge, Gabriel Gornstein, warned Mr. Bankman-Fried that if he failed to appear in court or violated any other conditions, a warrant would issue for his arrest, and his parents would be responsible for paying the hefty bond. Yeah, $250 million. Really? Like they've got that money just hanging around somehow? I doubt it. Now, when Mr. Bankman-Fried was asked whether he understood, he responded to the court, "Yes, I do." And those were the only words that he said during the entire hearing. Apparently, the discussions about bail had begun even before Mr. Bankman-Fried was extradited from the Bahamas. And in court Thursday, the deal was formally proposed by the United States prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, who brought the charges against Mr. Bankman-Fried. Now, Bankman-Fried was brought into court, and he was there with his attorney, a guy by the name of Mark Cohen, and Kristen Everdell. Mr. Cohen argued that Mr. Bankman-Fried was not a flight risk. He says that his client voluntarily consented to come and face these charges. Like he had a choice in it, really? And Mr. Cohen said that Mr. Bankman-Fried would like to address these charges. And Nicholas Roos, the assistant United States attorney, said that Mr. Bankman-Fried had committed crimes of epic proportions and that the case against him involved multiple cooperating witnesses, so it's not like it's a weak case for the government, as well as there being encrypted text messages and tens of thousands of pages of financial records that go directly to Mr. Bankman-Fried's guilt. But he noted that Mr. Bankman-Fried had a very nice family and significant community ties. You mean the guy that lived offshore? Yeah, it's not like he lived in the community in the Southern District of New York. No. He was in the Bahamas for the whole purpose to avoid regulation and trying to be extradited back to the United States until he really realized there was no other option. And the United States attorney had also said, well, his wealth had diminished significantly. It'd be very difficult for Mr. Bankman-Fried to hide without being recognized, the judge said. So he believed that his risk of a flight risk has been appropriately mitigated. Next time I'm in court and my client is accused of possession of some narcotics that carries a mandatory 10 to life sentence, and there's a presumption that they're a flight risk and a danger to the community, I think I'm going to cite the Bankman-Fried case that, hey, you can maybe steal a couple $1 billion and you're not really greater risk as the guy that sold or maybe possessed a firearm and some guns. Really, there's no difference. And even if the guy robbed a bank, there's a presumption of innocence that he's a danger to the community. What's the difference between Mr. Bankman-Fried, who defrauded people out of their money, and a guy that walks into the bank and says, give me all your money with a firearm? Really not that much of a difference. Unless, of course, there's two real justice systems that are going on here. You decide. Tell me in the comments if you think it's fair. Now, for those who don't know, Mr. Bankman-Fried, who likes to be known as SBF, was charged with engaging in criminal conduct that contributed to the crypto exchange's collapse. And he now faces numerous charges, which he's looking at least 110 years. The court didn't formally enter a not guilty plea, which sometimes can take place at a detention/arraignment hearing for some unknown reason. Normally what takes place is at first appearance there's a detention and arraignment hearing because an arraignment takes place because the indictment has already been handed down by the grand jury. So perhaps the United States attorney and Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried and his attorney are going to go in and proffer and see what kind of deal that they can work out. But normally the not guilty plea is entered. The matter is then sent up to the trial judge. The trial judge will set a trial date, and then the defense and the prosecution would have to move for an ends of justice continuance so that they could review the discovery and see how they need to proceed in the case. Apparently that's not the case for Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried. Just funny how that's all working out. Now, as you may recall, Mr. Bankman-Fried last week appeared in court, said he was going to fight extradition. Then he changed his mind over the weekend. Then he didn't change his mind. But then yesterday he finally agreed to waive extradition. It's not a big complicated thing. It just simply says, I'm the person that's being charged. You fight extradition if you say, that's not me. Why would I go back if that's not me? So then they have an identity hearing. It's not that big of a deal. And while Mr. Bankman-Fried was on the Gulfstream 550 en route to New York, the United States Attorney announced that two of Sam Bankman-Fried's closest associates had pled guilty to, well, the similar charges and offenses that Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried is charged with. Oh, and guess what? One little thing. They're already cooperating, and they're not even in jail either. That's right. Caroline Ellison, the former chief executive of the crypto trading firm Alameda Research, pled guilty to 7 criminal counts, and the former FTX chief technology officer Gary Wang pled guilty to 4 counts according to their plea agreements. Their cooperation with investigators likely strengthens, obviously, the case against Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried, who is accused of defrauding customers, lenders, and investors, and ultimately put FTX officials that he worked with in peril as well. So the fact that the two insiders' accounts and documents upon which they could rely at any future trial certainly doesn't help Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried's possibilities. Now, normally I would say Sam Bankman-Fried should probably get used to making himself comfortable in a prison cell, which would have taken place if he had been detained, if the government had asked for it. But they didn't. They didn't. Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, if you were accused of stealing millions of dollars, let alone billions of dollars, mark my word, you would be in custody. You would be deemed a flight risk. So, documents released today show that Ms. Ellison and Mr. Wang pled guilty to participating in a scheme to defraud FTX customers from 2019 through November 2020 by misappropriating customer deposits and lending them to Alameda. Ms. Ellison also admitted to participating in a scheme to defraud Alameda lenders by providing false information about its financial condition. She and Mr. Wang also pled guilty to misleading FTX investors. And the Manhattan United States Attorney, Damian Williams, made a video statement Wednesday night that the investigation into FTX was ongoing, and he urged anyone who participated in the conduct at FTX to come forward soon. We're moving quickly, and our patience is not eternal, he said. Now, a lawyer for Ms. Ellison declined to comment after her guilty plea was announced, and a lawyer for Mr. Wang said that his client took his obligations as a cooperating witness very seriously. He should, otherwise there's no deal. And whatever sentencing recommendation that the prosecution is going to make goes away as well. So as you may recall, Ms. Ellison and Mr. Wang have ties to Mr. Bankman-Fried that predate his founding of FTX. Ms. Ellison and Mr. Bankman-Fried worked together at Jane Street, a quantitative trading firm, and were once romantically involved. Mr. Wang and Mr. Bankman-Fried were in the same co-ed living group at MIT. The Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodities Future Trading Commission also filed lawsuits against Mr. Ellison and Mr. Wang, against Ms. Ellison and Mr. Wang late Wednesday for their role in defrauding FTX investors. Both agreed to settle the SEC and the CFTCS's claim and to accept liability, according to the regulators, an amount to be determined in the future. Mr. Bankman-Fried is also charged with conspiring with others to make illegal campaign contributions. Mr. Williams said that Mr. Bankman-Fried made political contributions that looked like they were coming from wealthy associates when in reality they were funded by Alameda with money from stolen customer funds. Mr. Bankman-Fried personally donated $40 million to political campaigns and committees, mostly to Democrats. And before somebody says, oh, Scott, you're not telling them he donated to Republicans. That's right, he donated some money to the Republicans, but most of the $40 million went to Democrats. I'm just giving you the facts. So FTX's new management has said that it will do whatever it can to recoup campaign contributions made by Mr. Sam Bankman-Fried and other FTX executives to pay back creditors. So I wouldn't be so worried about current FTX. I would be more worried about the bankruptcy trustee that has tremendous power to claw back money. So all those congressmen and women that we talked about who had received money from old SBF and FTX, and they said that they donated that money to a charity. Guess what? Get ready to write another check because the bankruptcy trustee cometh. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen. Sam Bankman-Fried got a gift for the holiday season, no doubt. Let me know. Do you really think that you would have got such consideration? I don't know. Maybe it's his family. Maybe his political connections. I don't know. Certainly makes you wonder and scratch your head and say, wow, are there really two forms of a justice system here in the United States? I think it's a pretty good example of yes. Next on the docket, the Idaho police chief there in Moscow says the internet sleuths aren't helping, and the guy that drove two of the girls home, well, he's explaining what he observed. So the police chief from the Moscow, Idaho Police Department believes that the quadruple homicide will be solved. And he's saying that they're not sharing information because the investigators are trying to refrain from compromising the case. And he believes that whomever murdered Ethan Chapin, Zaina Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves, that they will be brought to justice. Now, the chief apparently starts his day every day with a briefing at 7 a.m., and he goes through the information that's coming about. He says every resource is being utilized in its fullest ability, and his teams are working over the holiday, and investigators are driven by the need to bring closure to the families who lost loved ones. Now, he said that we've heard the rumors, this case has gone cold, this case has not gotten cold. He stated that we've been hearing people say that we don't have the right people. And he says, the chief says, I'm telling you, we have the right people in place, we have the right resources, we have the right individuals, and we have lots of experience that is overseeing this case to make sure that things get done. And he says it puts a big pit in his stomach when he received the call. But he's also saying that all these internet sleuths aren't helping because when they find out this information, then the information gets released to the police. And he says that basically the internet sleuths don't have the big picture, and you're actually creating more work and a distraction from the police investigating this particular case. He says these amateur sleuths from the internet come out to offer their 2 cents, even if it's not always a substantive lead. So people look to the rumors and speculation, and then they generate tips or things that they want to report that may not even occurred or they're not even factual. Police have to ask the public to stop contacting people that may be connected with the victims. And Facebook pages have been doxing ex-boyfriends. Social media pages have started plastering the faces of the victims' friends all over multiple platforms. And a Twitter user even began calling the local bar that Mogan and Gonsalves were last seen at that night. It's called the Corner Club, and asking the owner if he could provide the last names of the people she believed the bar is covering for. There's a lot of people who want to be involved from the internet. And he says, the chief says, that they are the official source of the information, and they're going to put out accurate information. And he wants everybody to know that he is committed to solving this case. Doesn't know how long it's going to take, but he is going to do it so that the families get justice. So there you have it. We've talked about this before. I get it. The public can be a great help, but you have to make sure that it's based in fact. There are lots of channels out there that will speculate on anything and everything, and you have to look at what you can actually prove. I've said this before. As an attorney, maybe I get too wrapped up in it, but it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't really matter what you think. It only matters what you can prove with legal and competent evidence in a court of law. Your hunch, your gut feeling doesn't cut it. Now, yesterday we brought you the video of the party that was going on at the victim's house there in Idaho, and neighbors are confirming that that house was quite a active party house. As we brought you the video yesterday, there was a party going on there, and none of the residents were actually home. That's how bad it was. So a lot of people in and out of that, and the neighbors are confirming that, yeah, there was a lot of students that are familiar with that house from inside the home. And at parties, if the cops showed up, people would just hop the fence and just walk away if the cops showed up. So we talked about the significance of that is even if, let's say, for example, they get some DNA there, it could be somebody that was just there at a party and it didn't get washed away. Doesn't mean that they were necessarily involved in anything. So making the police's job a lot more difficult, to say the least. Now, the driver, that was really probably the last one, the driver who took two of the murdered University of Idaho students home the night they were killed, has started to speak and let people know that he's haunted by the knowledge that it was his job basically to get them home safe. Now, surveillance footage of Kaylee and Madison showed that the girls picked up pasta at Grub Truck around 1:40 a.m. after ending their evening out at a nearby corner club bar in downtown Moscow. The driver said that he picked them up about 1:45 a.m. and they had their food. And he states that they were super excited about their mac and cheese, as the girls are after they go to the club. They sat in the back of the car. They chatted. They were normal, just like any other night. They weren't upset. They weren't talking about anything in particular or talking about anyone in particular. The driver said he was familiar with the surveillance footage in which one of the girls appeared to be talking about somebody called Adam earlier that evening. They didn't talk about him or any boy during that ride, he stated. Now, the Moscow police have contacted Adam, who they have described as cooperating with their investigation. And according to the driver, sometimes the girls would talk about boys, but that night they were just excited about their food. There was no apprehension he could perceive, no weird feelings there, no anyone being upset. There was no nervousness about them. They weren't afraid of anybody. There was nobody following them or following us, he describes that night. And there was absolutely nothing about that ride that was different or abnormal. They were just typical sorority girls talking away, and half the time they don't pay a whole lot of attention to the drivers. We're just kind of doing their thing, the driver said. Now, the driver also noted that he did pull right up to the door of the girl's house, stopping instead of right there on the street. He said, I just pulled up in front of their driveway. He said he didn't pull right into the parking lot. He usually tries not to get that close because he doesn't want to get robbed himself. He said that he tried to stay in a position where I can either go either direction if he has to get out of there if something were to happen. But he says that on that night, he saw and felt no threat whatsoever. In fact, he said he didn't watch them go all the way into the home. There were the two of them. It's a relatively safe place. It's not something that he would usually sit and watch because he didn't get any bad feelings about anything. And he said that in the past, if he thought that somebody needed help, he said he's taken kids to get their stomach pumped if they'd had too much to drink. So he's not above helping out or being observant of a particular situation. But he says, hey, this is a college town. These kids, and they're just trying to live their lives, and the drivers are just trying to drive them around, and they don't need to be preyed on. Now, the fact that Kaylee, Madison, and their friends were so brutally murdered within a couple of hours of him making the drop-off has weighed heavily on him. And he says that he's been driving for years, and to think that he was the last person to see them alive weighs heavy on them. He said that when he saw the news on that Monday that it occurred, that it was the neighborhood, but that was before they had released any names. So as soon as I knew for sure it was the girls, he said he went to the police. And he was swiftly eliminated from inquiries, having provided officers with a wealth of digital data, apparently, along with a time-stamped receipt from Taco Bell, to which he went after dropping the girls back home. Now, in the weeks since the murder, he says that he's watched and he's a little dismayed that the police have shared little information with the families, and the victims have obviously grown increasingly impatient. Driver said he had to take a week off just to kind of process everything that has taken place. And he says that the feeling in the community is that the police aren't trying. The police chief says they are, so I don't know who you're going to believe. Well, anyway, the driver says most of us have very little faith in the Moscow Police Department. We can't tell if we are watching qualified investigators who have handled this situation, or if they are at a complete loss and basically just grasping at straws. Now, as we noted before, the Moscow Police Department has pushed back on that. and saying that there's plenty of experience, even though the lead investigator has 2 years of experience as a police officer. And here we are. The murders occurred on November 13th. No weapon, no suspects, nobody named. They're still looking for this white 2011 to 2013 Hyundai. They got nothing. Starting to think it's going to go cold.